Instead of subsidizing yesterday's energy sources, we need to invest in tomorrow's. We need to invest in clean, renewable energy. That's the long-term answer that we need. That's the key to helping families at the pump and reducing our dependence on foreign oil.
That makes sense, but you've got to wonder about how ready America is to embrace a new energy future when times are tough and there doesn't seem to be enough money around to take care of today, much less invest in tomorrow. Hello, I'm Ray Suarez. Welcome to this new edition of Destination Casablanca. In the budget deal accepted by President Obama to avoid a government shutdown, $1.4 billion were cut from the high-speed rail project. $860 million came out of Title 17, the Innovative Technology Loan Guarantee Program. $318 million were cut from the Land and Water Conservation Fund. $550 million will come out of the Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy. And $40 million will come from the Green Jobs Innovation Fund. The Environmental Protection Agency, the federal department that enforces laws on clean air, water, and soil, will take a hit of $1.6 billion. 2 out of every 3 Latino families residing in areas that fail federal clean air tests. 2 out of 3. Will these cuts put those families at significant increased risk of developing acute chronic illnesses such as asthma from exposure to air pollution, including greenhouse gases? Opponents to the cuts maintain they not only threaten the environment and economy by continuing our dependence on oil and fossil fuels, the cuts also kill investment in new energy technologies and jeopardize the health of minority communities by eliminating regulations of carbon pollution and not restricting protections against greenhouse pollution. How do you save money, invest in new technology, save the environment, and community health all at the same time? Joining me tonight, Javier Sierra, bilingual media consultant and nationally syndicated columnist for the Sierra Club. His monthly column about Latinos and the environment is regularly published by the country's top bilingual publications. Andrea Delgado, senior policy analyst at the Labor Council for Latin American Advancement. Andrea works to raise awareness about critical issues impacting the progress of the Latino community in the United States. And Daniel Weiss, senior fellow and director of climate strategy at the Center for American Progress. He's an expert in energy and environmental policy, legislative strategy and tactics, and advocacy communications. Welcome to you all. Thanks for being here. Before we start our conversation, let's watch this report. Daniel Weiss, when you watched this budgetary process, and we went right to the brink with shutting down the government, and there was widespread consensus among elected leaders that everybody was going to have to take some pain. And the EPA lined up and took its share. A false economy, what's the problem?
Yes, well, that was certainly penny wise and pound foolish. At the same time, they're taking environmental cops off the beat, trying to police the polluters. They're also voted to keep $40 billion of tax breaks for big oil companies over the next decade and keep another $50 billion in low royalty fees that we charge when oil companies take our oil and they produce it. So it's really not a question of who has to be cut, it's a question of priorities. And clearly, the House of Representatives favor big oil over little kids. You know, the statistics you're giving at the beginning, a Latino child in America is 60% more likely to suffer from an asthma attack than an Anglo child. And the reason for that is that they live in places where the air is not healthy. In some of the dirtiest cities in America, like Los Angeles, like in the Central Valley, Fresno and Modesto, in Phoenix, have very large Latino populations. So what we're doing is we're taking our most vulnerable population, our children, and putting them at risk in order to make sure that our richest corporations like ExxonMobil keep getting big tax breaks. That's a question of not necessity, but that's a question of priorities.
The Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act, various regulations enforced by the Environmental Protection Agency have been on the books for decades, and America's air is cleaner.
Absolutely.
America's water is cleaner. So how come in 2011 we can't, at a time of severe economic distress, cut back a little bit on the enforcement. Those laws are still on the books. You still can't pour stuff into the willy-nilly into the water and into the air.
Well, here's the situation. We've made great progress since 1970. Rivers don't catch on fire in America anymore. That's real progress. You can see in Los Angeles when you're there, when you couldn't, 40 years ago. But as we said in the setup, 2/3 of the Latino population live in areas in the country that have unhealthy levels of air pollution. And that's for our most vulnerable populations. Right now, there's an effort being made to reduce mercury, arsenic, dioxin from coal-fired power plants and other big industrial facilities. And next month, the Republicans are going to be moving a bill through the House of Representatives that will block EPA from setting those health standards. So we have won many battles against air pollution and water pollution, but the war is still being waged by those who care more about polluter profits than they do about public health.
Andrea, a lot of environmental regulation is routinely referred to as job killers. And in a community where the unemployment rate rose faster and farther than it did for most Americans, aren't Latino workers more sensitive, more vulnerable to bills that are job-killing bills, that through regulation raise the cost of creating a job?
Ray, that is a false choice between job creation and sustainability. It's something that opponents of environmental regulations and climate change strategies have been pushing for a very long time. But actually, when we look at the investments that were made by the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act in green initiatives, Latinos benefited tremendously. 20% of the employees that were employed by these funds were Latinos and came from communities that suffer disproportionately from high levels of unemployment. This includes both Latinos and African Americans.
Has the Recovery Act legislation really lived up to its promise? When tremendous numbers of Latino construction workers, for instance, were thrown out of work when the housing bubble burst, did they march right into green retrofitting and making buildings more efficient? I mean, aren't they still out of work, most of them?
A lot of them are out of work, yes. They were disproportionately hit by the economic recession, and they're still recovering. The construction sector has a long way to go before we can return to pre-recession levels. But Latinos, as I mentioned, 20% of them benefited from green jobs, from investments to improve the energy efficiency of buildings, to weatherize. Several unions, labor unions, were providing training programs for Latinos to make sure that they knew how to install a solar panel, that they could turn the skills that they currently had in construction to something that was repurposed with an environmentally friendly benefit.
If you go to the Industrial Valley in Cleveland, Ohio, if you go to the south side of Chicago, where President Obama was a community organizer, and follow that Michigan Avenue coastline into northern Indiana, working class people look at those smokestacks with no smoke coming out of them, and they say, look, we accept that a certain amount of dirtiness creates work for us, that the clean air that we're enjoying now because all of these factories are silent has made us only poorer, not healthier and wealthier. What do you say to that?
Well, environmental regulations, we don't want our communities to pick between what is good for their health and what's going to make them pay their bills from day to day. That is the false choice that we don't want them to make. This is why investments in clean energy, energy efficiency, in the research and development of technologies that can put these people back to work, it's what we're promoting. When we're talking about environmental regulations and pollution abatement programs, which are what is going to be affected now with the $1.6 billion cut to the EPA budget, these are technologies that can improve the air quality of our communities. From the design of the technologies to the installation, the operation, there's huge green job creating potential, and it's up to us to decide whether those technologies are going to say made in USA or whether we will be importing them from somewhere else.
Javier?
This is a 19th century choice that you've given us here. We either see a lot of smoke coming out of the stock, or we're not gonna work. I mean that is not the case, and we've seen throughout the world, including China, that is not the case. If you invest in new technology, clean technology, and sources of energy that are renewable and that produce at home, this is a win-win situation. What is a lose-lose situation is what we're seeing here. Is kind of we advance for maybe 10 years and then we go back for another 5. And we need to invest in the technologies of the 21st century. Another point, for instance, the Clean Air Act that is being attacked in Congress by conservatives as a job killer. Every year, the Clean Air Act, according to the EPA, saves the country $100 billion, basically in health bills. Okay, so all these kind of murking the facts, murking the whole atmosphere about what is actually taking place in the United States right now. But if we go the way of clean technology, it's a win-win situation. If we stay with big oil and big coal, it's a loss situation.
You know, Ray, the University of Massachusetts did a study of a couple of these pending clean air rules, new rules that will protect kids from mercury and other pollutants, and found that they would create 2 million net additional new jobs. So we can create jobs by forcing big polluters to clean up, in addition to saving, as Javier said, billions in dollars in costs due to premature deaths, additional healthcare costs, and lost productivity from people missing work.
But those are systemic savings that you don't
Absolutely.
necessarily see immediately in your house in the form of a check. And living an extra year is something that you can't measure when you're out of work and 35 years old and need money right now. It's a different kind of economy. I'm not doubting that those savings are achieved.
Well, we need to make sure that these programs then turn back and invest in these communities that most need the assistance to help them develop jobs where they can use their existing skills. For example, there is a proposal, it's bipartisan, that would help both homeowners and commercial building owners invest in making their buildings more energy efficient, and would put thousands of construction workers back to work. And it would be in those same communities. Now, it had bipartisan support in the previous Congress. Now that the Republicans have taken over, we'll see if it gets a hearing.
It's now time for a break. When we come back, how cutting on energy investment may affect job creation. You're watching Destination Casablanca. Please stay with us.